Welcome to Legal Nurse Podcast. This is your spot to get inspiration, tips, stories, and guidance to help you in your legal nurse consulting practice. I'm Pat Iyer, the host of Legal Nurse Podcast since 2016. We are among the top 5% of all podcasts in the world in terms of longevity and sharing information consistently week after week with legal nurse consultants. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Welcome to Legal Nurse Podcast. My name is Pat Iyer, your hostess today, and the originator of Legal Nurse Podcast, which started in September of 2016. And we have been broadcasting continuously every week since then, serving as a way for legal nurse consultants to find out more about the field, to increase their skills and their knowledge. My guest today is a certified emergency department nurse and a certified pediatric emergency nurse. She has extensive experience serving as a subcontractor and working on a variety of cases. Welcome to the show, Jennifer Wilson.
Thank you so much, Pat. I'm glad to be here.
As we were talking about your background, Jennifer, as we were planning this session, we focused on the fact that you've had some experience working on mass tort cases. And I'd like to focus on that today. And first of all, to define for our listener who might not know the term, what is a mass tort case?
Sure. So a tort is really a civil wrongdoing against a person or an organization or an injury. And a mass tort is a bunch of people suing the defense or suing a company or an organization. It's different than, sorry, I always have to have my notes here, than a class action. A class action lawsuit is, so a mass tort is each person is represented as an individual suing the defense. But a class action is each person is represented as a group suing the defense. So it's quite interesting. It can encompass a bunch of different areas of law.
Can you give us some examples of the types of cases that would be considered a mass tort?
Absolutely. So mass torts can be pharmaceutical. They can fit under the umbrella of medical devices, toxic torts, exploitation and abuse, um, product liability, so products that go bad, plane crashes, stuff like that. Those are all considered cases that have mass torts.
And as we think about a legal nurse consultant's involvement helping attorneys, I'd like you to help us understand the role of the legal nurse consultant in assisting an attorney with these types of cases.
Absolutely. There are so many different avenues that a legal nurse can assist attorneys with the mass tort cases. So, one is you can go through medical records and you can define certain injuries that have happened to that claimant, such as cancers. You can determine whether or not they've had mesh, there's been faulty mesh. You can determine whether or not that they've gone to treatment after treatment after treatment for these injuries. You can summarize their medical records for them. You can also, there's a big need for life care planners in this. Life care planners to determine how much injury and problems that they're going to happen in the future. There's so many different avenues. One of the nurses that I was talking to said, you know, research is also a good avenue for legal nurses to help because what happens is a person gets involved in a mass tort case. This mass tort case may have certain qualifications. So they get certain cancers, certain illnesses, certain diseases. Then what happens is you go to this what's called Science Day. Science Day is when you present a bunch of research. Defense, plaintiff, both present research to kind of further narrow down the injuries that are going to be accepted for that mass tort. So you could come up with what is a research for type of cancer caused by a chemical that they've been exposed to, and what are the current researches out there. And then you have to go to, it goes from Science Day to bellwethers. Bellwethers are when you have your best cases, both defense and plaintiffs, and they present them to a judge, and the judge gets to kind of pick and decide, or the defense and plaintiff kind of go through, and they can get rid of some good ones, get rid of some bad ones, and then they come up with a plan to before the case gets settled. So what if the attorney doesn't have their ducks in a row? What if the attorney doesn't have all the facts and all the injuries and so on? Another good avenue is you can find torts within a tort. So say a person was, they have cancer, but yet they also have a faulty implant. Possibly. You can find torts within a tort for those attorneys and present them that information. So it's a lot of looking through the records, defining illnesses and injuries, and presenting that to the attorneys. There's so many avenues.
Yeah, you brought to mind the idea that maybe if somebody had cancer as a result of environmental exposure, there could have been a delay in diagnosis of cancer that could create that as a medical malpractice case with a tort within a tort.
Correct. Correct. And many attorneys don't just do mass torts because mass torts can take so long to settle and come to settlement and agreement. They often do personal injury or medical malpractice. So you can assist them with those cases as well.
They have to keep the pipeline full of cases, and the usual length of time for a medical malpractice case is 3 to 5 years. It's nice to get some shorter cases in there to help with the cash flow, particularly for the plaintiff attorney.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They have to stay busy and keep their income as well. Income, helps with the other cases, helps with the research, helps with the legal nurses.
Well, you brought up some various aspects of the role, Jennifer, thinking about the person who's helping the attorney behind the scenes, looking at whether or not this particular plaintiff or claimant does indeed have exposure to the device or the chemical or whatever is the action, looking at the consequences of that exposure. Can you tie those damages to the exposure? I had an opportunity to do a bellwether plaintiff case with a couple of people who were exposed to chemicals from a pharmaceutical plant. They both developed lung cancer. One of them was a smoker, one of them was not. And I was curious, although I never had a chance to talk to the attorney about, well, why did you pick this woman who had a smoking history when that could plausibly be the cause of her cancer, as opposed to being in the neighborhood and being exposed to the air and the groundwater from that pharmaceutical company? Regardless of the fact that she was a smoker, she was a bellwether plaintiff, and the attorney was successful in settling the cases on behalf of all the people that she was representing. And we talked
Wow.
about that life care planner's role as well, looking at the damages in which they are a testifying expert. What kind of care will that person need as a result of the exposure to the product, or the chemical, or whatever is the claim?
It's very, very interesting. And there's a lot of avenues that legal nurses can help. And usually it's thousands of people involved in these cases, which also, the numbers don't lie, really. You have a lot of different avenues that you can help.
Well, when you talk about thousands of cases, immediately I think about the solo legal nurse consultant who gets a call from an attorney who says, as I have gotten those calls, well, we have hundreds of cases that we want to send to you. What are some of the pros and cons of working in that mass tort field when it comes to the flow of work? And how do you manage that? Is there any strategy that you could suggest of what to
That's a
do?
great, yeah. That's a great question. It's hard. The company that I worked for, it was really sink or swim. It was, are you available? I need as many hours as you can give me. We did for a long time. And then all of a sudden there wasn't any work because, well, that's just the way that cases go. So it's one of those where you got to be organized, you got to be efficient, you have to be able to multitask, and you need to pay attention to detail. You really need to pay attention to detail. I was involved in those medical summaries, but I was also involved in QA. If you can't spell or you don't have a good program that can help you spell, it's not the right job for you. You have to pay attention to detail, be a good speller, really be a complete, it's the complete package. But really, it's like riding a wave. You're going to the top, you're going back down again. It can be super, super, super busy, and then it's not. And that's just the way of the game. Not so much a game, but really the business. You just have to be adaptable and willing to take a challenge when you need it and when you're ready.
Riding a wave is a nice analogy because many of us would like to be coasting along on a lake where there are no waves. There's consistent work, there's consistent income. The shorelines are far away. You're not at risk of falling overboard and getting swamped. And yet you're describing a reality that's very different from that when you're working on mass tort cases.
Correct. You're exactly right about that. It's very different. It's a lot of fun. And you really feel like you're representing the clients that have had bad stuff happen to them, that were exposed to stuff that were not something that they could control, something that companies and organizations and the bigger picture shouldn't expose us to. It's very interesting, and you really feel like you're making a difference.
Well, we know that products have been taken off the market because they were not well designed or well tested. We know that sometimes generations of people are exposed to chemicals that have gotten into the groundwater, into the ground, and are sitting there contaminating our land, and there's no easy way to get rid of them. So there can be some far-reaching consequences associated with the injuries that claimants have.
Correct. It's tragic. It's sad. The cases that I did were I did a lot of Camp Lejeune. So it was a lot of exposure to the contaminated water. And people not only got Parkinson's, but they got multiple types of cancers. And they were all, getting older. And it was terrible. It was sad. It was tragic. Something that shouldn't have happened, but did. So
Mhm.
it's just terrible.
As we think about this type of work as a legal nurse consultant, of course, you've mentioned being able to spell and being detail oriented, and that applies to any kind of work that we do as a legal nurse consultant. What are the skills that you identify that make an LNC successful working on mass tort cases?
Well, you have to be adaptable. You have to be organized. Really, as any legal nurse out there, you have to be attention to detail, confident to approach those attorneys, ask questions, um, do anything you need to do to, this is what they need. Also, you have to be adaptable to change. Like I said, adaptable, so adaptable to change. Maybe one week it's this is what we're looking for, and the next week it's this is what we're looking for. So you just got to roll with the flow.
What would you say to somebody who was concerned that they would get easily bored by working on mass tort cases?
You just have to think of the big picture. The big picture is that you're helping these people. Each person is an individual. Each person could be a family member. And it can get repetitive, but it's actually a lot of fun. So you just have to kind of, if that's something that doesn't interest you, don't do it. But if it's something that interests you for the big picture, for we all became nurses because we care for people. This is caring for a bunch of people at once, really.
Have you heard about our newly revised LNCEU continuing education program? This is an opportunity for you to attract more clients, get more cases, build your skills with the training that I have available for you in LNCEU. You get to choose between the content designed for new LNCs or experienced LNCs. Our once a month open office hours is a new feature in which you have an opportunity to ask me questions and learn from the questions of other people who are attending these meetings. They're held on Zoom and they are once a month. When you join LNCEU, your trainings are in the vault for you each month. You have videos, 2 videos a month, or a video and a new book if I have released a new book in the preceding month. This gives you access to powerful information geared specifically to you as a legal nurse consultant. I would love to have you join us. See you at LNCEU Open Office Hours. To join this program, go to lnc.tips/LNCEU. That's lnc.tips/LNCEU. And one of the things that comes up, and I'm sure that you've been asked this when you've worked on mass tort cases, is this person jumping on the bandwagon because they've seen an advertisement that says, if you've been exposed to X, contact 1-800, we are your lawyer? Or are they legitimately part of the group of people who've been affected? How does that play into the LNC's role?
Those are great questions. So I thought of that. And what happens is that's a class action is what kind of you're describing. A bunch of the attorneys advertise, hey, jump on the bandwagon. Hey, call me if you ever been exposed to this. Well, here's the thing. If you're not going to want to give up your medical records and have somebody go through it because everything has to be verified, don't jump on that bandwagon. It's not the right thing to do because everything has to be verified. And if you are one of those that doesn't allow it, then the attorney needs to not include you in that lawsuit because everything trust and verify is what it is. You can't believe that a person has it without having their medical records and actually having proof.
That's a good point. And it's something that I don't think we realize as legal nurse consultants is that once we enter the litigation system, then anything in our medical past or current medical condition is open for discovery. And with the goal of the attorney who's defending the company to look for anything that could disqualify that individual. Now, my husband and I went out to dinner one night, and he walked in front of the car and didn't see a curb that wasn't painted because the light was shining in his eye, and there was nothing that would indicate that there should have been a curb there, and he tripped over it and he fell and he fractured his orbit and had a head injury. And I raced into the restaurant and demanded in the kitchen that they call 911 and get an ambulance there. And then we talked about, yes, it was hazardous. You know, after he recovered, he ended up not having surgery.
Goodness.
He recovered from his head injury. You know, he had minimal damages, although his face definitely wasn't the same. And I said, if you file a lawsuit against the restaurant, then they will demand your medical records, and everything in your medical history is going to be fair game. Everything. Now, he had nothing to hide, but the idea of being questioned about his medical problems, medical history, was something he just didn't want to go through. So we watched that restaurant for a while, and ultimately about a year later, they went out of business, and we were sitting there going, yes, good, you deserved it. And the new owner took that curb and painted yellow on it so that it would stand out. And then ultimately another owner did the paving to get rid of the curb altogether, because it was a true hazard for anyone who parked where we did and could walk right into that curb. But as we think about the exposure that comes along with the legal system and being questioned in deposition and having to answer interrogatories and perhaps having things that you don't want everybody in the litigation system to know, that could prevent people who are otherwise entitled to compensation from being part of a mass tort action.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm very glad your husband's okay. But yes, you're exactly right. That also makes me think of one of the torts that we are working on. If you had any suicide in the past, any suicide attempts, that was a disqualification for it. And terrible, makes no sense, but that was a disqualification. And yes, people are going to go through with a fine-tooth comb your medical records, your personal information. So you have to be willing to share that if you are going to file a lawsuit, unfortunately.
What are some of the more memorable cases that you have worked on?
Sure. Um, Actually, so one case that I'm going to tell you about is actually a friend of mine. A friend of mine had a cage in his neck, and it went bad. And he couldn't figure out why he was having so much pain. He couldn't figure out what was going on. So once they did actually scan him and figure out that it was bad, I directed him. I'm like, you got to get that out. You have to contact an attorney. You have to make sure that they keep it. This is what you need to do. And I kind of just, made sure that he was contacted with a good person, made sure that he did what he needed to do. And it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. It should have never happened. The manufacturer said, this is a, 1 in a million chance. We are now changing the way that we do things. Thank goodness. And this won't happen again, I promise. But the other cases that I had were just the tragic cases of people with Parkinson's in addition to multiple cancers. It was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. And they were nearing their end of their life, and they were involved in this lawsuit, and they deserve as much money as they can get, but were they going to live to reach the end of the lawsuit to get their payment that they were due? It's just terrible. The amount of cancers that one person had in particular, I think it was bladder, prostate, lung, and maybe even pancreatic, in addition to Parkinson's. Nobody should have to go through that.
And you mentioned Camp Lejeune, and for people who are not familiar with that, can you explain what the allegations were with the contamination of the water?
Absolutely. So there was a certain time period, I have it written down, a certain time period where you had to be on this, I think it was a military institution where they drank, that was their water, and it was contaminated with a bunch of chemicals. That was the only water. They bathed in it, they drank it, you played in it, and so on. And they all, most of them, not all of them, but a lot of them developed Parkinson's in addition to multiple different types of cancers. There is, I can give you other examples of other cases if you'd like.
Sure.
Okay, so the right now the Depo-Provera shot is causing meningioma tumors in the brain and spine. So they are starting a lawsuit for that. Um, Roundup, which is a chemical that is sprayed, everyone knows what Roundup is. It is illegal in multiple countries, but the US. That is causing cancers and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Paraquat, which is another type of fertilizer, is causing Parkinson's. Then there's like the 3M ear plugs that military used when they were out shooting or in war that was causing hearing loss. The hernia mesh. So the hernia mesh, people had this faulty hernia mesh, and what you had to do as a legal nurse is make sure that they had a bunch of complications from it, and then their case went to the mass tort. NEC, which is the formula that had the necrotizing enterocolitis for babies, that is still being worked up and being settled. Hair straightener, talc, firefighting foam is now a big one. The firefighting foam that the men were exposed to, men and women, they're getting breast cancer and prostate cancer. And really the list goes on. Agent Orange. Agent Orange was one that we also dealt with. Terrible, just terrible cancers.
Ooh, that's quite a
Yeah.
list.
It's terrible. It's terrible. And actually, right now, PFAS, which is what you were talking about, Pat. So that the companies such as DuPont or the companies that make the firefighting foam spray are leaking chemicals into the groundwater. They're leaking it into the groundwater, and they're called forever chemicals, which is what the PFAS stands for, which is, I don't know exactly the name of it. But they're coming up with the cancers and other neurological illnesses from the exposure to that. That's kind of on big and being worked up right now.
And I had an opportunity to work on some cases in which the hepatitis C virus was accidentally introduced into a pharmaceutical company, and it was put into the immunoglobulin that was being given to people who had severe immune disorders. So they developed hepatitis C after getting the infusions at their homes. And I worked on pedicle plates and screws, which were made by an orthopedic company. The plates would break, the screws would back out of the holes and press on nerves, and the patients had to have surgery to remove those medical devices. And I also had an opportunity to work on a few hip implant cases where the implants were leaking heavy metals into the blood and then had to be removed. People had to have revisions of their total hips. Those are a few that fit in the category of mass tort.
Wow, that's terrible. That's absolutely terrible.
Couple more questions before we finish, Jennifer. Suppose an
Sure.
LNC was considering working on mass tort cases. What advice would you give that person?
Really just hit up the attorneys that work with the mass torts, show them your worth, that you're organized, dedicated, hard worker, attention to detail, um, and that you're, always willing to go with the flow. If it changes, great. I'll be happy to do whatever you need. And just not be afraid that it's going to be ebbs and flows. It's going to be ups and downs. It's going to be super busy and then maybe die off a little bit. So always have backup plan for other different kind of cases. Have some interest in the personal injury, the medical malpractice, because many of those attorneys are going to need your help with those as well. Just be flexible.
And what would be the best way for people to contact you if they wanted to follow up with you and find out more about the services you offer?
Sure. So my email is Jennifer at legalnurseassoc.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me there. You can email me. And then I do have a website. It's www.legalnurseassoc.com. You can find me there.
That is a great name for your website, by the way. Good choice.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts with me today. I know that your comments have stirred up some interest in at least some of the people who are going to watch this podcast on YouTube, on our Legal Nurse Business channel, or listen to it on our website at podcast.legalnursebusiness.com. I know that it will stimulate some thought. And for sure, when legal nurse consultants see the headlines about new products that are being identified as being the target for mass tort cases, they'll have a greater understanding about what that involves.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Pat. I really appreciate it.
You are welcome. I'm glad that you could join us today. And for you who's watching this program or listening to it, thank you for being part of the program. Please go to podcast.legalnursebusiness.com. We have now available our 640 plus podcasts sorted into some major topics so that if you have a specific interest in marketing or in finance or in building your business, you can sign up to receive the past podcasts on those topics. We provide you with the video file, the audio file, and the transcript provided. All three of those are available. You can get those at podcast.legalnursebusiness.com. I'll see you shortly. Thank you for being part of the Legal Nurse Podcast audience. I'm delighted that you've joined us for this episode. Be sure to go to legalnursebusiness.com and get your free reports. Look around the website, pick up some tools that will be useful for you in your legal nurse consulting practice. And be sure to join us for the next episode.